Hello everyone. I hope you already see me and can hear me. I'll just check some final settings on my end to be sure that everything works correct. Give me a couple of moments. Yeah, now you actually should see and hear me. I would like to ask you, so if you experience any technical issues like during our webinar, like maybe audio issues or video, please let us know in the comments to the stream so we can actually arrange this accordingly, okay? So as you can see now, we are in our new studio today, so we are changed the location a bit, so we are streaming today again. We are actually continue the series of webinars that I'm continue to conduct for business owners, for product developers, for everyone that actually has a relation to personal data, to the processing of personal data, and I try to clarify, I try to actually to give some practical tips, some practical advice to business owners, to founders that launch their products. Maybe they're at some kind of stage, maybe they change some aspects of their products, and they do have questions as to their manner. They do need to operate to the manner their privacy operation, their privacy practices should be actually built, right? So my name is Jen, right? I'm a privacy practitioner. I advise companies, help advising companies on different aspects of the privacy of personal data protection, especially when they actually have some new features to be launched, some new aspects of their functionality to integrate within their products, and for sure, during all these aspects, during all the stages of your product development, of your operations in the business, you do have some kind of changes that also relate to the personal data of your users, of your customers, and during all the stages, during all these phases, you need to be aware of all these privacy issues that can arise during this cycle, or actually that maybe can change your infrastructure in such ways that you need also to be able to change some aspects within your infrastructure as well. So last time we talked about privacy policies, about the structures of privacy policies, which aspects you need to consider, and how do you need to structure it, right? And this time I want to talk about different roles in which actual business companies can bear during this operations and during their actually connection with the personal data, with their privacy in the privacy aspect. So we are talking today about your role, about the business owner's role within this privacy reality, right? And I would like to mention the first aspect that in most cases, business never stay perpetually in one role. They either simultaneously presented in different aspects and different roles, or they can change during their operations. And today we will talk about the roles of data controllers, about the role of data processors, about sub-processors just a little bit, and about joint controllers. So these are different aspects. They have different purposes. They have different actually aspects of their functioning, right? For sure, these different roles have different scope of obligations, of responsibility, and it's really important to understand your role, because as I've already mentioned, depending on the defined role of your business and the specific operations, the specific relationship with your customers, you will have the different scope of responsibilities, of obligations that you need to be aware of, that you need to ensure, that you need to guarantee for your customers, for your users, and for sure you will actually be able to avoid any penalties, any compliance issues if everything is structured, if everything is in a correct manner from the beginning. So let's start talking about this. Let's start talking about data controllers. This is actually one of the most important aspects we talked about today, because Most business owners, when they launch their business, when they maybe launch their website or mobile app, they actually define the infrastructure of their product. They define their elements, their tools that they will be using while they actually need to work on their product, right? So you're, as a business owner in the role of data controller, define the purposes and means of processing of personal data. So what actually it means? So as you know, we talked about it earlier about the purposes that you need to clarify, to be specific in the purposes, why you actually need to collect and process users and customers' data. So when you define, when you think about your infrastructure, when you think about how you actually want your product to be built, how you want it to be seen, right? How you want it to be functioning, you're defining all these elements, maybe with your web developer, maybe alone. If you're in the role of the web developer, it can also happen. And you also decide for what purposes, like why you need this data from your users. Why do you need them? And you, for example, you know that you have e-commerce website, for example. You're going to sell, let's say, some accessories there, right? And you need this data from your customers to be able to fulfill their orders. You'll need to ship these orders to the customers. You'll need also to collect their contact information to maybe to send some updates on their product, on the orders that they have already placed. You'll also for sure probably would like to market to these persons maybe later when they already purchase this product, and you want to market, you want to remind about your product to them, and for sure you also want to be able to send some marketing newsletters to these users, to your customers. What else do you want? So you also understand that I would like to place some analytics tools to my website to better understand how my website performs, what audience I do have, what actually, how much time they spent on the website, etc. Right? All these questions, and you define the scope of this, whole scope of the purposes that you are going to rely on when processing personal data of your users. That's why, like, when you make this decision, when you decide on all this is your responsibility. That's why you're acting as a data controller in this role, and you're taking the responsibility for your users, for this processing operations, for how you actually going to deal with their data, right? And other aspects of the controllership of the data controller's scope, right? It's about the means. So you are the person who decide on the means of personal data processing. So what actually it means? I would say that we can define this term as different tools, different methods of personal data processing. So let's say you're developing your product. You are deciding on the whole structure, on the infrastructure of it, how it will be built, how it will be work. For some aspects of your product functionality, of your service functionality, it's really widespread practice, you need to integrate some external tools, some additional functionality that is not developed by yourself, right, by your company, but which is just an external, and you're just integrating it to your product. And by this means, actually, these tools and these methods, it's what is meant here, right? It's about like all kinds of service providers, vendors you're engaging when you want to develop some kind of functionality. So we will talk about these examples when we will describe the role of these data processors. Why I'm talking about this is because this means these tools that you are integrating and you are engaging to your product, they are acting in the other role, in the role of data processors, meaning they do not decide on the purposes of the processing of data. You are the person who actually take control over this, right? So you are deciding this, you are taking responsibility, and you need to disclose to your users, to your customers, what are you going to do with this data. You are the person who actually also take care about the security measures, about the safeguards that you will need to implement when dealing with this personal data. And you are the person also in the role of data controller who actually performs compliance check, performs vendor due diligence, and decide on the scope of service providers that you are going to engage. And About these service providers, about this role of these vendors that you are engaging, we are talking next, because this role is called data processors. So the main difference between data controller and data processor is that these companies, these organizations that act in the role of data processors, they do not decide on the purposes of the personal data collection, right? So they do perform processing operations on the behalf of data controller, meaning they do not take control over deciding on why you actually need this data, why you are collecting this data. The only function they perform is they process this data on your behalf, on behalf of data controllers. So one of the main aspects is they are not allowed, data processors are not allowed to act on their behalf. They are not allowed to decide how they're going to use this data. They need to act in strict compliance with your instructions, with the instructions of data controller that provide to them. And this is, as I've already mentioned, is the main and the biggest difference between these two roles. So I've mentioned earlier that when data controllers develop their products, they decide on a number of features, including of the tools, of integrations they are going to use, they are going to implement within their product, right? And it will be easier for me if I explain on the certain examples for you to give the whole understanding on what I'm talking about. So, about what kind of data processors we talk about when we describe their role. So, let's say you have SaaS platform or even the website. It can also be the same issue, and you are integrating some cloud infrastructure, right? They're actually their third-party provider, which will store data of your users, of your website visitors, as well as of your clients, consumers, right? So, and you are not developing it from your end. You are not developing a separate location, separate storage, right? Separate product for this. No, you're just using this internal third-party tool. You're using this cloud infrastructure. So there are plenty of examples, like Amazon Web Service, right? So Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. You can use either of these options. So there doesn't matter which one you use. The issue is here. There's all these parties, all these examples. They will act in this actually specific manner. They will act as data processors. So they will process this data. They will store this data actually on your behalf, because storage is not a separate kind of specific function. This is just a type of processing operations. So when we talk about storage, even if you don't store on your own end, but you delegate this function, you're still responsible for the data of your customers. You are still responsible for how this data will be processed, and you are delegating this function to third-party service providers, right? So the same idea is with their other tools. Let's say analytics tools, right? So you want to, again, to place some analytics tags, some pixels, some cookies to be able to understand how your website performs, what audit worldwide. So this is pretty famous, right? What else? Let's again turn back to the examples with e-commerce website, right? And just think what kind of functionality can be there. So for sure, a lot of websites also want to use some kind of customer support services, right? And a lot of websites have live support, right? You see a lot of chatbots there, and you want, for example, to provide this function to your users as well. So, and you decide what kind of tool you can use to be able to perform this function. For example, to integrate this chatbot tool in your website. And again, you're thinking about third-party providers. You're thinking about the vendors that you can use, that you can rely on to fulfill this function. Let's say you are using HubSpot, you are using Zendesk. In all these aspects, if you actually rely on the services of these companies, they will act as data processors. So they will act according to your instructions. They are not allowed to process the data of your customers, for example, to market their own products to target these users. No, if they do this, they no longer act in the role of data processors. And this is the main difference, right? So they need to be strictly in accordance with your instructions, with your functions. Okay, some more examples, and I will turn back to the issue of how actually you need to regulate your relationship with the data processors. So when we talk about data controllers and data processors together, right? So let's say again, we've mentioned earlier, so I'll stay on this example about marketing your products to your users, to your customers. To fulfill this function, again, you don't need to develop your own marketing tool. You don't need to develop your own solution for this. You will just engage some third-party service provider or vendor, right? The company, organization that already fulfills these functions, that already can perform this. Again, different categories, different vendors are doing this function. You can think about maybe Mailchimp, SendGrid, one of the most popular companies, right? Their main function is primarily to send newsletters, some marketing emails to your customers, and that's all. They are not allowed to send the marketing emails to these customers with some other advertising, like with advertising from third parties. No, because this is their function, right? And this is the difference. So now we know exactly what is the difference between data controllers and data processors. What's next? So you will need to ensure that these vendors will act strictly in accordance with their role, meaning that they will not process this data for some other purposes. They will not overlimit their functionality, their scope of obligations, and their rights. This is important. And how do you actually ensure this? To do this, you will ensure that you have signed data processing agreements with every of such vendors, that perform the function of data processors. And in these agreements, we'll not talk about the structure of this agreement right now because it will take a lot of time. I'll just explain you that the main aspect that you need to ensure that is present within this agreement, within this data processing agreement, is that the scope of purposes, the scope of processing operations that this vendor will perform on your behalf is strictly defined, that it's clear, and it doesn't contain any additional, maybe overbroad scope of activities that this party will perform. This is one of the main aspects. You will also need to describe some other aspects and to ensure that this company, the service providers, that they follow it, like security measures that they will take with relation to the personal data, that how they will react to the user's requests, how they going to respond to your audit requests, how they actually notify you about security incidents, about data breaches. All these aspects are also described within this document, within this agreement. But the main one is about their limitation, the strict definition of the scope of their obligations. Now we consider two roles, data controllers and data processors. The next role, actually, it's not about one company. I will explain it right now. It's about their cases when organizations can act simultaneously, they act jointly on specific purposes, and they actually define the purposes of personal data processing jointly. And in this case, we talk about joint controllers. So when we talk about joint controllers, it means that we have two or more companies present in these relationships. So this is one of the first aspects. Next one is about why they joint controllers. You may think about why they are not independent controllers. And the issue is that these companies, these organizations, they define their purposes of processing of personal data jointly, meaning they are equally influenced on the decision. They decide on this aspect jointly. Let me also give you some practical examples so you could get a better understanding of this aspect. Let's say you have, let's say we have some companies that want to launch a core marketing campaign. They actually gathering together, they decide what we are going to do, why we need this data, and they also decide how we are going to process this data. So they are deciding on the tools, right, on the means of processing. And they launch this campaign together. They together made this decision. They again taken other responsible decision on all these aspects. So they act as joint controllers. So as I've mentioned, marketing campaigns, let me give you some real examples, right, from real world, so it will be easier to understand for you. So remember, we had integration between Apple and Hermes when they developed their Apple Watch series, right, Hermes Apple Watch. So this is one of the example. These companies, they were separate independent controllers if they act separately, right? If they act towards their privacy business operations, everyone in their own directions. But now they decide to launch a new product. They decide to market a new product for audience, right? And now they are starting working together on this, and they starting deciding on the purposes of the process and how actually, why they will need the data of customers, right? How they will gonna collect this data, how they will gonna process this. So if this company taking like joint controllership on all these aspects, they act as joint controllers. They define between themselves, they define it by means of agreements between them. They define on who is gonna to present their privacy policy, privacy notice to users, who will gonna disclose, who will gonna respond to users' requests with regard to their personal data, with regard to their privacy aspects, who will take other decisions with regard to personal data. So they will define everything by themselves. Another example, for example, again, about core marketing campaigns, it's, for example, Meta and Ray-Ban. When Meta decided to launch this campaign with Ray-Ban to present their Meta glasses to users, right, they again acted in the same manner. They acted as joint controllers, meaning that in all aspects they will have joint responsibility, which is really important, especially when we talk about any violations, when we talk about some compliance issues, when data regulators will come in some point and will need to clarify some aspects, they will be jointly responsible. And this is really important because they took the full responsibility and they make all these decisions together, and they for sure will be responsible together. So this is like the main difference. This is the main difference between independent controllers and joint controllers. Another interesting aspect that maybe a lot of owners, a lot of business developers are not even aware of when they implement this feature is that when you launch a website, and sometimes you also have a blog in your website, within this blog you want to add additional social plugin, the social plugin that helps, for example, like your post and share this blog post to social media like Facebook, right, run by Meta. And by doing this, you actually Meta, Facebook, they are not acting as a data processors in this case. Actually, European court decided on this case recently, and they defined that in this case, in these relationships between you as a website developer and Meta, right, that actually is the developer of this social plugin, you are acting as joint controllers, right? So you are equally responsible. And the issue is because the purpose of processing is the same. So you jointly define it, and you jointly have defined that you want to market, you want to raise awareness of your product, and that's why you actually using this tool, right? So these all are examples, right? Now, actually, I also want to talk, before we are wrapping up everything, I want to talk just a little bit about the main problems, the main mistakes that a lot of businesses do when they define on their role when they actually decide or disclose their roles within their policies, within their documentation. So for sure, the first problem is they sometimes misunderstand the role of their vendors. Sometimes companies think by default that that if they engage any tool, if they engage any partner, any tool on their website, on their product, on their mobile app, this company, this organization should be acting as data processors by default. It's not true. It's not true because you need to define, you need to see specifically what is their function that this vendor organization will perform, how they're acting, what actually they can do with this data, and how broad is their scope of their responsibilities. As in the example with Meta, with social plugin. And other examples are advertising networks. When you are actually engaged in any advertising campaigns and you want your product to target within different social media platforms like Facebook, TikTok, I don't know, Microsoft Bing platform, any other one, right, that you can imagine about. These companies, they are not your vendors. They have, they actually can and they will market with their own products, with the products of third parties, your users. They are not your processors in this case. They are independent controllers. And you need to be aware of this because it's your responsibility to inform your users in your privacy policies, in your privacy notices about this role, about your role, about the role of your vendors, partners that you engage, that you rely on. And you need to give your users the options to opt out, for example, from this process and operations, depending for sure on the context, depending on the jurisdiction in which you're marketing, in which you're actually presenting, right? But these roles are different. They are not your processors. So this is one of the first mistake, and you need to check clearly and to actually to be able to list all your vendors and to specify the role of each of this, to take care and to ensure that you have in place all compliance measures, that you have in place all documents, all agreements concluded with each of them, right? Because depending on their role, you will have different kind of agreements and different types of arrangements. Another problem, another mistake, again, is that some companies, even knowing that these vendors are acting in the role of data processors, they do not check on their compliance. They do not perform any vendor due diligence checks, right? So, meaning they do not analyze and do not perform any even like basic privacy checks on these vendors, whether they are reliable, what security measures they are taking, whether they actually disclose within their public documentation their role, how they will communicate with you on some aspects of personal data protection, how they will respond to your users' requests if they come. All these aspects, they are not checking it. They are not aware of this, right? And that's why these aspects often are like misunderstood, right? As a result of this one, another problem, another mistake is they do not have a basis, not have any places where you can store actually signed all agreements, data processing agreements with these vendors, right? So you need to be aware, you need to ensure that you have all agreements signed with each of your vendor, that you are at least at certain point protected from some mishandling of personal information, when they will process the data of your users, of your customers. So it doesn't have 100% guarantee that they will not act like this, that there will no any security breach or security incident from their end. But at least you have their power of influence on this company in case something goes wrong, because their data processors, they do also have their own responsibilities. So the responsibility of data controllers is broader, but in any way, data processors are also reliable. They can also be reliable even in monetary aspect, right? So This is the main concerns and the main actually problems that usually happen in practice, right? When we talk about these roles, about the business roles. And one aspect that I would like to mention at the end is about their dual actually role. Sometimes companies, sometimes business developers, as I've mentioned at the beginning, they can act simultaneously in different roles. So they can be both a data controller and a data processor at the same time. So when it happens and why it happens, it's for sure, first of all, it depends on your product functionality, on what you are offering to your users, what actually the scope of your individuals, of the data subjects, and how you're going to process this data, meaning like for what purposes. I will give you another practical example so it will be easier to understand. Let's say we have Shopify. Everyone knows this big merchant, right? This big company that providing merchants with the ability to build infrastructure on their basis, right? And Shopify, when it processes data of their clients, of consumers, which actually want to use the functionality of Shopify to run run e-commerce websites on their basis, they're collecting the data of these customers, of their clients. In this aspect, in this reality, they're acting as data controllers. Why? We know for sure, because they define these purposes, they define how they will go and use this. But when they actually, these companies, these clients, when they launch their websites, when they offer some functionality to their users, right? In this capacity, merchants, let's say, let's call them merchants, right? These merchants, they are collecting data from data subjects, from their clients, from their users, right? On their orders, on the different, let's say, when they order, when they, when they ship the products, and they have their own base, their own client base, right? In this manner, in this capacity, Shopify will act as data processors. They will no longer act as data controllers in this manner. So in relation to end users, in relation to their clients of merchants, of the consumers of merchants, they no longer act as data controllers. They are not defining how and why the data will be processed from their merchants' behalf on their end. They cannot control every merchant. They cannot rely on it. But what they can do and what they do, they actually process this data of their merchants, or they process the data of clients, of merchants, of end users on behalf of every merchant, right? So they fulfill the function that they're supposed to do. And that's why they're acting here in this double role, in the dual role simultaneously. In the relation to one category of data subjects, they act as data controllers. In relation to another one, they're acting as data processors. So this is how actually it happens in the business realm, right? So this is actually everything I wanted to talk about today. I hope that you will find something useful and helpful for your business operation, for your understanding of your role, because it's one of the first aspects you need to clarify for yourself, that you need to define before you'll go forward. Why? Because depending on your role, depending on on your capacity, on your operation, you will need to build your product, you will need to build your relationship with users in a certain manner. And your role is defining in the aspects of the scope of responsibility you have and the scope of obligations that you will have, right? So I hope that you will find something helpful from today's webinar. And as usual, if you have any questions and any maybe clarifying moments that you would like to learn more about, please drop us a message and we will respond to you. Maybe we'll even launch a separate webinar related to this topic, because it's always difficult and challenging to try to build the webinar in such manner that that could touch every aspect and to explain, to clarify this one. So I will meet you next week. We'll talk about other aspects that will helpful to every business owner, every founder, every website developer, right? And see you next week.